Welcome. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming. And my name is Peter Florenzos. I'm actually the immediate past president of Design Institute of Australia, Queensland branch. Yvonne Ranson here is actually one of our new co-presidents, and you'll hear from Yvonne a little bit later tonight. DIA, actually, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, DIA is the peak industry body for design and design business, and we've been advocating for the professional recognition and advocacy and professional recognition and improvement and betterment of designers for the last 60 years. So welcome. Dialogues is a really, really great forum to allow conversation regarding often controversial issues facing the design profession. Dialogues is for you. It's your chance to contribute to the conversation. For those of you who are viewing live stream tonight, you can also join the conversation at Twitter on #DialoguesLive. I'd just like to introduce Natalie Wright from Asia Pacific Design Library, who is a partner of Dialogues here tonight, to say a few words about APDL, and then we can get the show rolling. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, and welcome everyone to the Edge Auditorium tonight for the third Dialogues. As Peter said, we're very proud to be a partner for the Dialogue series this year, supporting the Design Institute of Australia. I'm not managing the clicker here, so it's going to be a bit of a to and fro situation. Everyone knew what that slide was about. Okay, so just for those of you who don't know the Asia Pacific Design Library, hands up anyone who doesn't, who hasn't heard. Okay, a few people. So we're a part of the State Library, a community of interest. We're a new prototype model for 21st century libraries that focuses on experience rather than just providing access to information. So we really encourage people to get involved in some of our programs and use our online platforms. I guess the Asia Pacific Design Library is a shared space for industry, academia and the public to come together around knowledge generation to do with design in the Asia Pacific. So all of our platforms that I'm going to talk about now do that. The first being our Design Lounge. For those who haven't been to our Design Lounge, I really encourage you to go up to level 2 in the main library. We've got a dedicated Design Lounge there with a collection that spans 5 different categories, those being public places, which is about architecture, interior design, urban design, better living, which is the product design angle, communication, so graphic design and digital and web-based design, design thinking, and also our fashion collection. So for all people that are interested in design, that covers off a lot of different areas. Recently, I don't think I'm meant to advertise this, but at the moment the library as a whole has opened up for you to borrow books for 4 weeks at a time. You can borrow up to 10 books. We really encourage you to have a look in the Design Lounge and use the books, because that's what they're there for. So that's our Design Lounge. One of our other platforms is Design Mind. So this is a central online location for design thinking education resources. So this is primarily targeted at teachers and students. The content is supported by our workshops and programs, and also by Design Online, which I'm about to talk to you about as well. Design Online is our shared environment for the design community to come together in the creation of new knowledge around the Asia Pacific design. This very much focuses on our Design Pulse events. So in the near future, I'll tell you about what's coming up, which is exciting. But we really encourage you to get involved and write some articles for us for Design Online. Share your opinions or I guess your academic knowledge on design, whatever takes your fancy. So you can certainly call us, let us know that you're willing to write, and we'd be very happy to send you some more information. So this is just some information about perhaps what that would entail. Ashley Tucker, our online design, online content coordinator, will step you through that, so it's not a scary situation at all. So Think Outside is our next series on the calendar, starting in October, and we have a lecture series and workshop in October, 14th of October, and then following in November. The topic that we're looking at in this series this year is based on Brisbane's future identity. So we're looking at the social and economic implications of creating and celebrating a design identity for Brisbane. So hopefully that'll be a really interesting topic for people to engage with. We also, as part of the G20 cultural program, we're putting on a 2-day Design Minds workshop for teachers and 80 students, school students, where the kids are going to be looking at a new identity for Brisbane through the designing of a new model for Brisbane City, which will be exciting. It'll be in this place here. By the end of the 2 days, we'll have a massive model of Brisbane City, which will be totally exciting, with a time-lapse video showing the whole process. Don's been involved in a similar workshop that preceded this one, and he can tell you more details, but it's going to be fantastic. We also are staging, sorry, I'm hogging the microphone here, but there's a lot of exciting things happening. The DIA National AGM is coming to Brisbane this year, and we're hosting the actual meeting in the Design Lounge this year. So please feel free to come along to that if you're members or non-members. And we'll be having a small informal get-together after that on the platform at State Library. Some of the other things we're hosting in the next couple of months is AI Gold Medal Talk Series, so that should be an interesting one. I don't want to tell you too many details because I'm getting off track. We are actually hosting the AILA, the first inaugural AILA Festival, so the Australian Institute of Landscape Architects here at State Library. And we have an exciting exhibition called CUSP coming to the State Library beginning November till February, featuring 12 designers Australia-wide who are looking at products and strategies for social impact. So that's a really exciting exhibition that we'll be tapping into with other programs as well. And just to end that, Design Offline, we've got a copy of this as a Lucky Door prize this evening. This is a publication we put together to help you, I guess, when you're coming to our events, to write some articles, to take notes. It's a really nice little book. Best wishes to the person that gets that prize. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. I'll quickly hand over to Mike Malloy, our moderator for tonight. Mike's been a very, very big advocator of DIA and always is such a huge supporter. He gels everyone on the stage, and we look forward to you moderating again tonight. Natalie, thank you very, very much for your words. The APDL relationship with DIA is one that we've always had. It's one that we have been very, very grateful to have formalised with APDL with our formal MOU earlier this year. And we look forward to that ongoing dialogue and knowledge sharing information, which APDL and DIA do so collectively well together. And thank you for the support. Cheers.
Thank you. Okay, well, welcome to Dialogues number 3, the last in the series of 3. It's good to see you all here. Let me introduce the panel. Chris Bowes, Becky Green, Yoni Yarvela, David Baggs, and Jennifer Loy. I'm glad you made it, Jennifer. Otherwise, there would have been people looking for a fifth of their money back. We've got 5 people from diverse design backgrounds, and you've probably all read the blurb in the literature. But if you haven't, it'll become evident to you from the conversation of what their discipline is and where their interests lie, and most particularly how they relate to the world that we are probably all in, i.e. the world of design and manufacturing and so on. The format for this evening is we have, those of you who've been here before, forgive me for telling you something you already know, but I don't really care that much. I'm going to tell you anyway. The format is that there's 6 questions. We have 3 questions, and then a break, and then another 3 questions. And each question we'll discuss for around about 12, 13 minutes, and I'll be prompted at the back when it's time to move on to the next question. The questions will come onto the screen, and I'll ask and promote a kind of lively discussion with our panelists, but you can also contribute to that. And in fact, we really would welcome your contribution to that. So if you have something to say, you could shout out, I guess, but it'd be preferable to put your hand up, and I think Tom or Laura will get to you with a microphone, and they'll signal me, and that will kind of get you going. So we would really encourage you to be as involved as you like. This really you only live once. You might as well get stuck into it and embarrass yourself by asking a really crazy question. I would encourage you to do that. I've encouraged the panel to be as argumentative as they like, disagree with one another. That's all part of a kind of lively debate. And I think that hopefully we'll get some interesting insights into the world we all have to deal with. The overall topic is about technology and the role it plays in the world of design. And most specifically, the topic for this evening is about the kind of technology in design from a kind of ethical viewpoint. So I'll endeavor to kind of keep people generally on topic with that, under that general umbrella. So let's kick off with question number 1, which should appear on our audiovisual extravaganza any second. Question number 1 is, well, there I have it. I rest my case. Any questions? So question number 1 is, they don't make them like they used to. And these questions are all meant to be somewhat provocative. There's a good one coming in a while. This one is, they don't make them like they used to. Specifically, this is about inbuilt obsolescence, function, etc., etc. And so let's talk about that. And let's kick off with you, Becky.
Typical. Well, are we not going to vote?
Oh yes, I forgot that part.
Do you want me to take over?
Do you guys think, just as a starting point, are you in the kind of yes or no? Do you think, would that be true? They don't make them like they used to?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, in that case, let's start with you, Chris.
How do I deserve that? I think the question, of course, do they make it like they used to is an interesting question. But when does it actually refer to when they used to? Because I think every society is making the things that represents them in the state that they're currently in. So when you talk about how the pyramids were made many thousand years ago, they were made with the latest technologies, the latest engineering, the latest craftsmanship, according to what the society needed at the time, and they were probably made to last, and they have lasted forever, and they took 150 years to build or 1,000 years to build, who knows. And the question why today we have products that don't last 2,000 years or buildings that don't last 2,000 years is a reflection on the state of technology, state of society, state of consumer expectations. So I think there's many examples throughout the history of products and of architecture, and I would argue that at every moment in history we have produced the architecture and the products that we deserved at the time.
Yeah. David, would you agree with that?
I think that, I mean, that's obviously true. The problem is that we're in a unique period of time. We have all of that history behind us and all of that social momentum behind that whole consumerism thing behind us. But we're staring down the threshold of a 2 to 10 year climate change tipping point, where in the past the sustainability mantra has been durability at all costs, whereas now we actually have to say, well, where's the durability payback? How much carbon emissions are we going to create today that might pay back over time? Are we better to actually look at products which have a very low environmental footprint now, may not be as long-lived as they have been in the past? As long as the resources are captured and reused, then we might be better to actually look at short life cycle, low impact products. Because otherwise, if we say, just take the approach that we've always taken and said durability is the king, then we may actually end up digging ourselves into an earlier grave.
Yeah. Yeah, Jennifer.
Well, I disagree completely with your statement, because although I can see where you're coming from, every product at every time reflects the understanding that you've got and the technology and the aspirations for society at a particular point in time. But now we've got such global connectivity and such understanding of what's happening around the world, and our whole interaction with consumers is so different that the way we approach making anything or supplying anything or talking about anything, discussing anything is so different. So I don't think we make it at all like we used to. Or, you know, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't agree with it.
I think we're not dressing like we used to 500 years ago. We're not eating what we used to 500 years ago. We're not working in the same way. So why would our products be made in the same way?
This is just a moment in time. Everybody probably thought in 1428, that was a special moment in time. That was a big panic of whatever that panic was. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying, you know, obviously, if you have an iPhone today, that may only last 2 years. Usually after 1 year, the battery fails. That is a shame in a way. But on the other hand, if your iPhone lasted 20 years ago, there wasn't even an iPhone. So it wouldn't make sense to make an iPhone last 20 years. Yeah. I think the approach that David is taking to say, well, if they're not meant to last for 100 years, then how are they made, and how do they reflect sustainable principles, then probably gets closer to an equivalent of what products in the 21st century could or should be like.
Yeah.
I mean, we really need to be looking at adaptive platforms. We really need to be saying it's going to last 20 years provided it makes sense environmentally for it to do that. But also, I mean, we're seeing complete shifts in supply chains. I mean, I saw for the first time today a product that when you purchase it, you get a kit of core parts, and then you print the rest of them on your 3D printer. And that's actually a little wind generator. So, I mean, it's designed in Sweden, but you actually just get, you know, probably the motor shipped out, and then you print the rest of the parts yourself. You know, in that context, in the context of that kind of change, the current supply chains and the current way we do business is going to be very, very different.
Yeah. Okay, let's bring Yoni and Becky into this.
Yeah, I'm getting cranky now. Just to agree with Jennifer, one of the points that you made was that because we haven't had, 20 years ago we didn't have an iPhone, therefore why would you design an iPhone the last 20 years? Well, because that's the right thing to do. Because if we design, for example, for repairability, or if we design for longevity, then that's actually the right thing to do. Because the trick is what goes into landfill, not what we create.
You mean the right thing to do in the sense that it's appropriate or environmentally conscious?
The right thing to do on every front. There's lots and lots of problems that we're solving by designing the right answer there with the iPhone.
But the answer to that wouldn't be to design something for a 100-year life cycle, but to design something that can adapt to future technologies. I mean,
exactly.
I remember my Walkman, for example, that used to play tapes in the 80s. If that was built to last 100,000 years, while none of you even has a tape recorder at home, that wouldn't make a lot of sense. But if it was designed in a way that you can upgrade it to a CD player after 10 years, or you can reuse the components to make
But doesn't
bags.
that mean then that we're not making things like they used to? We've got a completely different approach now. We're sort of far more aware and
because we're making things that weren't there 20 years ago.
Well,
That's why we can't design them in a new way. We need new ways of designing things because we live in a completely different society.
Yoni.
As far as I can see from the question is...
Sorry, time's up. No, go on, just kidding.
That's all good. I'm happy to listen. Like the meat in the sandwich here.
Yeah.
From what I can see from the question is that the whole context from the whole concept of the design has changed quite a lot. Whereas, like you were saying, hundreds of years ago, people started off designing a product with a different sort of mindset. Now, obsolescence into a product is part of the whole design. A lot of times, especially in like the technological side of things. So, for instance, I bought one of the first generation iPads, and I think I got about a year and somewhere between a year and a half out of it, and then there wasn't any more updates for it. So it's like that whole idea is that the whole money-making side of it has become such a big part of the design process that it affects the longevity of products in that sense. So.
We've got a question up here.
Just a question, to put some context into the argument. It's a little bit philosophical at the moment. Can we just go across the group and find out what model phone everybody uses currently?
Sorry?
I use the last year's model, but only because I haven't gotten around to get the latest one yet, the iPhone 5, I think. 5S or whatever.
This is kind of straying into the next question, but what the hell? We'll do it. That's okay.
I have an iPhone 5. I upgraded when my iPhone 3 died.
I have an iPhone 5.
5-year-old BlackBerry.
Okay.
And it still works fine.
Has it got an aerial?
iPhone 5.
Yeah,
I've got an iPhone 5.
I can't wait to upgrade, by the way. And I'm not saying that because, I mean, the argument is not that I want to throw it away, but I want to be able to use latest technology, 21st century technology, 2014 and 2015 technology. And I would be more than happy if the iPhone is designed in a way that you actually rotate it. There's no reason to throw it if you can take it back to your shop and say, give me the new one, which is effectively what's happening. And Apple in particular, as a very forward-thinking company, recycling products and having, I don't know how they call it, they don't give you new phones, but kind of factory repaired phones, for example, to factory refurbished phones.
But
as long as it stays within this cycle, because the essential components of the iPhones are probably all the same, and then there's new memory, hard drive, etc., things that change.
But I think this is a much bigger issue than just phones. I mean, I know you're talking about that because there's a guy here from Vodafone trying to look for customers, probably. And that's what's prompted that question. We've got another question up here.
Hi, is that on?
Yeah.
Hi, Becky, you mentioned something that was interesting. It sort of touched on where I, as a having trained in industrial design, probably would have naturally skewed to in this question, and in that design for repairability, that design for more longevity in a product. And I guess when I think about the way they used to, in inverted commas, I think about maybe an old pocket watch that might be used and repaired and made to use over a number of generations. Does that same relationship between human or self and product exist anymore? Or does that relationship, or has that relationship turned digital? Is that relationship, do you think that that relationship with a physical object in this current epoch or era, or does that still exist, or is that itself, is that relationship what's changed?
Great question. I think it definitely still exists. It's just not part of our consumer culture at the moment. The exciting thing for me is that the whole role of a designer is to design the future. When we can analyse the past using economic rationality or using design history or research, but actually what's going to be the future is up to us to design. So if we want people to conceive of things as beautiful and not throw them away, then we just design them that way. We need to change that culture as a group of designers. I'm a graphic designer, for example, so part of my responsibility is recoding things for that to be beautiful to people, for that repairability to have meaning and be beautiful. And I think that we're just, frankly, going through a phase. But that's my hopeful view, I think. But I'd like to help design the future that I'd like to see. Does that answer your question? Oh. Then yes, it does.
Yeah. Did you want to contribute to that, Jennifer?
Is that Jared, by the way? Is it? Hello. I actually think that our relationship with products is becoming more tangible than it was. And I think if you look at co-sumers and producers and all those, the sort of emerging sort of co-production that we're seeing with companies like Nervous System, Ucodo, Digital Forming, all the kind of online where the whole role of the designer is changing. So it's no longer about our design ego and we design something and you either buy it or you don't. You know, we design the parameters for something that allows consumers to go in and alter it so that they have some kind of investment in that product and hopefully keep it. Or, I mean, really, we all ought to be, of course, designing for disassembly because human nature means we want change. You know, we're stimulated by curiosity. And so to design things that last forever is really ignores human nature. Though I do watch Antique Roadshow quite a lot. And
Exactly.
Okay, we might move on to question 2. I think that's a good point. Question 2, we've actually, to some extent, oh no, we haven't, beg your pardon. Yes, well, we've somehow miraculously gone to question 3. Yeah? Is this related to that last issue?
Yeah, it's just related to that last one.
All right, fire away.
I'm not sure, Jen, if we are becoming closer to the relationship.
Is that Tristan?
It is.
Hello.
Hi.
Go on then.
I think it's becoming more tangible because... Does it feel like it's becoming more tangible because as humans we're actually becoming more technological? We're kind of moving towards some kind of cyborg hybrid. So it feels like it's more tangible just because we're moving towards the technological. So if we're just living in the image of that technology, is it actually the product, the human experience we're getting closer to, or the technological experience we're getting closer to?
Well, obviously that's debatable. To me, I think it's the human experience, and I suppose as a lecturer, I see students that have more connection to objects when they've got more control over production, and that they can actually interact with things at a more fundamental level in terms of like digital fabrication. And I see a rise in the maker society around the world and repair garages and that whole interaction with the objects around us. So kids no longer, I mean 20 years ago they might have assumed everything had to be bought in a shop, and now they're far more involved in making because of the sort of technology that's allowing that. But I don't see it as, you know, there were some very emotive statements in there. I don't see it as living in the image of the technology. I see it as a human experience that's enabled by the technology. And I certainly think the connectivity around the world and with each other, to me, is a really positive thing. And it certainly helps with convergence and contraction, for example. You know, we're not living on our own little bubble anymore. And I think that's a really good thing for society.
But surely that's just happening around the edges. It's not mainstream consumer-based society.
I think again, you know, we have to be careful living in Australia. I've just come back from Europe, you know, and was at conferences there and going to exhibitions there. And I think, to me, there's a very different attitude there than there is to here. to do with all this kind of thing. So, you know, I don't see it as, I think over there is a feeling that it's more mainstream. Certainly in America, Maker Society, you go to a Maker Society event, there's 60,000 people there. That's not fringe. That's not a fringe element.
What do you mean by around the edges, David?
Well, the engaged edges of society where people actually think about what they do when they buy something, apart from reacting to advertising or reacting to a message that's being fed to them, or reacting to a technological lock-in system like Apple loves to do, lock you into a system and make sure you stay there and then feed you, iteration after iteration.
Yeah, well, look, that actually brings us to this next question, which is the right question too, which is, my 2 years is up, it's my right to have a new one. I think it's kind of what you're getting into here. And I mean, I think this is a sort of somewhat philosophical point that's being foisted upon us by companies like Apple and so on. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Can I contribute just within the context of this question and that question? In particular, can I see a show of hands of everybody here who has a mobile phone, excluding Don Welch, on their person? Right, so we're all cyborgs, right? We've already got a piece of technology that we're kind of a little bit maybe secretly addicted to and using. So we're already cyborgs. That's the first point. The second one is our psyches are changing with technology. And to pretend that's not happening and keep continuing is...
Head in the sand, Tristan, head in the sand.
Well, no, but see, I'm agreeing. And like we had...
To mobile phones again, which is the first flaw. Technology's been around since the time a man picked up a stone.
Rock. You're not going to tell me a rock is a technology.
You know it, Jen, and that happened 160,000 years ago.
Let's move on.
There's a wider discussion we could probably have past iPhones, so let's try and do that.
No. Yeah. Well, if that's the next point I want to make, and if you use the terminology digital technology rather than just technology, and I don't mean hand technology, where our psyches are changing. We used to have natural time, right, which is sun, moon, birth, death, that kind of natural how things worked. And then we've got social time, which is what we've had for millennia after that, which is calendars, etc., and clocks and watches that some of us wear. But now we're seeing technological time, which is changing our psyches. We have 24-hour access to information. We've got, it's instant. And it's changing our psyches. It's making us, in fact, a little bit more primitive. So I think your second part about whether we exist in technology or, that sort of perspective, I think that's pretty much spot on. That's how our psyches are changing.
Okay, Yoni, let me bring you in here, because I think, Yoni, you're a designer and a maker, and this must impact your world somewhat differently.
Yeah, I think, look, it's quite interesting, at least from the products that we sort of produce and the design side that we sort of take to it, is, there's technological side of things, and I sort of feel that, yes, sometimes that really sort of takes away from the relationships and society in general in that way, and people sort of communicating with each other, where they're all sort of, you can go into any sort of a group setting in a cafe, people are meant to be meeting up, but they might be all on their own phones checking their sort of status update of their friends and that kind of thing. And so it is a double-edged sword, I think, that it can take away or add to sort of, I can be in touch with cousins of mine in Finland, 24 hours a day, and real easily be in touch with them and sort of keep contact with them, as opposed to, going back 20 years ago, it cost you an arm and a leg to be in any sort of contact with them. So, I mean, I guess from the sort of design perspective of that, I feel that our approach to it is a little bit sort of different. I mean, the products that we design and that sort of creating that sort of interaction with the product that people can actually feel like they have sort of a value and attachment to the product. But from a technological point of view, I think that it's hard to sort of place it in a category. I think it needs to be sort of left on its own to a degree, and I don't know, it's hard to say from my point of view where it's going to go, but I think it's evolving in that sort of interaction.
Chris, we're not asking you to predict the future, it's okay, don't feel too bad about that. Chris, from an architectural point of view, looking at this question from not just about mobile phones, but in a wider, more philosophical viewpoint, I mean, if developers or if clients wanting buildings designed and built have this kind of philosophy, which I think you possibly come across with, resorts, with restaurants and bars, and with that kind of hospitality end of the architecture and design world. Does that impact on you?
There's an example maybe in Sydney, the UTS Tower. It's one of the worst buildings in Australia, and it was built to last forever. In fact, it will last so long that you can't even take it apart. People are looking at turning a building from the 1960s into a building of the 21st century, but the technology employed at the time doesn't allow for any change. So essentially, it's a building, everybody was excited about the invention of air conditioning, everybody was excited about body tinted glass, electricity was kind of cheap. So what do? You clad a tower in body tinted glass, crank on the aircon and turn on the light. And in 2014 you're kind of wondering, how can we now improve this? And so we're looking at ways of improving the performance of buildings by adding layers to buildings and treat buildings more like, for lack of a better word, an iPhone, where you can update a building, where a building can constantly be updated according to latest firmware, new applications, new technologies. Now you don't use body tinted glass anymore, you can actually get much better glass. You can today you would naturally ventilate a building like that. You would try to.
You can externally shade it too.
You can externally shade it. So our proposal, actually, I don't know if you've seen it, because you said that our proposal is to wrap the UTS tower into an intelligent skin. And the skin then would have a similar function to human skin or animal skin, where it mediates between inside and outside, takes environmental factors into consideration, changes with heat, with cold, with humidity, collects solar energy, collects rainwater, etc. So in other words, buildings have to be designed in a way that they're future open and not just that they last forever.
Yeah. So does everything have to be designed like that, David? Designed to be future-proof, basically.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think the UTS Tower is a classic example of what not to do. I finished my architecture degree in that building, and my building services lecturer at the time said this is a really interesting building. When they try and dismantle it, if they cut a single one of the tendons, there'll be pieces of concrete in Mascot. So it's not a building they're going to demolish very quickly. So they're going to have to do something very innovative with it. But it's a really it's essential. It's like any technology platform; it needs to be adaptable.
Yeah. What was the excuse for that? At the time, it was more convenient and cost efficient to build it that way?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just there to do, and someone wanted to do it. I mean, you don't see too many other buildings like it because it wasn't exactly a success.
Yeah.
It's an architectural style called brutalism, and maybe that could have been a hint at the time.
Yes.
Mind you, you do see its cousins every time you put a post-stress tendon into a concrete building. So they're in exactly the same boat, but just on a slightly lower scale. I don't know if you know how it's constructed, but it's huge blocks of hollow concrete held against a central core with steel tendons. So it didn't take on for a good reason.
Yeah.
Can I just say what I really like about that story isn't that you're knocking it down and building a more sustainable building. You're retrofitting. You're trying to fix a problem using your talents as a designer. That's what we should be doing instead of building new
I can't see the problem
buildings.
with it. I mean, it's. What were they supposed to do? How old's that building? 30 years.
It's in the past.
It's about 40 years old, and we have done
1970.
Knowing what they knew,
5 or something.
Was that kind of flagrantly unethical of them to design that building the way they did?
They knew what they were doing and they did it anyway. So yes, in a way, I think it is.
So ethically, they
couldn't give a damn.
But the interesting thing, and David would be able to comment on that more, is the embedded energy in a building like that, and the energy cost of pulling it down and rebuilding it, as opposed to changing it, updating it, reskinning it, and future-proofing it.
We've got another question.
Hi. Which raises a really good point, that UTS building. I've just been looking at technology and design, the perfect match for as long as we both shall live. What you're really talking about is elimination design. So, you know, how can we put into this discussion elimination of technology by design?
You say elimination?
Elimination of technology by design. So it's actually not as long as we both shall live. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, you break up with somebody because you know it's the right thing to do. Well, it's the same with design and technology. We need to make rational decisions about the fact that that technology was wrong. How do we design processes to eliminate that in society? And communication design and recoding is one of the most effective ways as far as mobilising a different desire, but architects and product designers have a role to play too. Is there something you can say about that?
They have to care about what the outcome is, apart from design. They have to care beyond the design, and that's something which I think can be a challenge for all design professions.
Do you mean sustainability isn't part of design?
The way some
isn't one of the problems.
The way some people practice it, no, but obviously it needs to be.
Do you think it should be legislated in that sort of legal sense?
I think aspects of it need to be, because it isn't happening naturally. The industry isn't at, you know, we've known about climate change since the 60s. I mean,
are you talking about products now, or are you talking about architecture?
I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about buildings, products. I mean, we basically need to have some sort of legislative controls around it, because we've been shown not to respond to imminent, significant stimuli.
Yoni, that's going to affect your world a bit, isn't it?
It would. I think it'd have to be a way to do it where, or do you have any guidelines that you think that would work to be able to sort of bring that sort of outcome where, you know, society can still move forward and designers can still design, but also still be able to make a living and sort of keep a business running in that sort of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's lots of companies out there doing it now, and they're making very good money doing it. They just need to have the right frame of reference to be able to do it.
Jennifer, what do you think about this legislation business?
Well, I mean, again, I think the legislation that has been brought in, for instance, again in Europe with cars at the end of life having to go back to the manufacturer, and so we now design them for disassembly, so you can take the bumpers off and all that kind of thing, then basically put it through a chipper and then separate out the materials. I think legislation is definitely required. Yeah.
I think there's a good way to do it, but implementing it is probably the difficult part, so that, you know, there aren't people that fall off the bandwagon, and doing it in the right way and in the right sort of pace and bringing it into the marketplace.
And it's who is it who's in control of that? If you get some radical nutcase who comes along and brings some you know, extreme sustainability issues.
Well, speaking of radical nutcases, we've got a question up here.
Thank you, Michael. I'm definitely a nutcase. Is that working? Yes, it is. You talk about and David knows very well on this. I'm a manufacturer. We are in an industry, in the window treatments, blinds industry, where there is no legislation in a lot of the solar opticals required now. I'm not going to get into the details, but you're saying it should be legislated, and I'm so far been trying to do that for almost 8 years now. But right now, you've got a situation where you have manufacturers that are making those standards, and those standards vary depending on which country they get those solar opticals created in. And some do create them, some have them done. David's smiling because he knows very well the truth in that fact. But you are susceptible to that because our government will not stand up. You're leaving GBCA to do what they consider the little bit they do, and the rest of the solar optical information that you are asking for is not legislated. There is no groundwork, there is no basis. So you have a lot of different manufacturers who are trying to do the right thing, but what's the right thing? There is nothing there. There's no Australian standard.
Good
and
point.
Look, you know, while I say legislation is required, I would be in dreamland to think it was even remotely possible in this current environment, current political climate. I mean, it's just never going to happen at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think we might be waiting a long time for leadership. Let's go on to question 3. I think it's a good time. Clear the air. relative to your world as designers, design educators, just put that frame of mind when you think about this question is, does taking the moral high ground lead to redundancy? In other words, do you do yourself out of a job by doing what's perhaps perceived to be the right thing, in inverted commas, whatever the right thing might be? Do you, I forgot about these things. No. So you all think that, correct me if I'm wrong, you all think that you can do the right thing and specify products, design things that are sustainable, that are not going to be cost effective and competitive, and
that's a big
not do yourself out of work.
That's a huge assumption. I mean, look at Interface Carpets is a perfect example. Ray Anderson, you know, and when he discovered how long it takes carpets to biodegrade, you know, to degrade, in landfill, and basically they don't. So he radically reorganised his company and now creates a product service system, and he's actually making far more money than he did before. So I think there's a real assumption in some of the things, the way that you're phrasing that. Yeah. So I challenge that.
Okay.
So there seems to be this underlying subtone of this question that designers design things just that they break apart after 2 years or 2 weeks so they can design other things. And the evil manufacturers manufacture things just that they break apart so they can sell more of them. And the politicians, of course, support that because they need the economy going, and therefore that's kind of the vicious cycle.
Exactly.
And
that's exactly what is happening.
You're saying you don't think
so
that's true?
So that's the subtone of the question. There's certainly an element of that. But to say if that was about to change, that we were all out of job is completely nonsensical, because in the opposite, in order to achieve that, all designers, all manufacturers, and all legislators have to work twice as hard to actually achieve that. You have to be much more creative, you have to come up with better ideas, better technologies, better processes, and therefore it will just shift. Let's say if there really was the evil designer who sits down every day, designs one product, so it breaks down the next day so you can design another thing. That same person has then the task to design products that can be constantly updated, that the manufacturer has to take back, that can turn from a car into a toy, into a minute crate, into an artwork, etc., etc. So it just becomes more challenging, but more exciting and probably more skilled.
Instead of a library of materials or books, you have a library of parts, interchangeable parts, where flexibility is aided by being able to lease surfaces or lease items. Someone wants to change something, you don't have to go out and buy it new. You just go to the library and get a different kit of parts. And look, I also just wanted to take up the point that you made earlier about sustainability doesn't have to cost more. The work we do in life cycle analysis shows you can look at the work we do and have a look and see which products are the most sustainable, and a lot of them are actually all at the same price. You can have the best in the breed and the worst in the breed costing exactly the same.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of bad publicity from your point of view to have to counter in that regard, and I think that's a changing thing. Yoni, what do you think about this issue of taking the moral high ground relative to doing yourself out of work?
I think you could, if you did it wrong, you can do yourself out of a job. But I think there is a way to do it where you can have a captive market for your designs and the products that you produce, or the buildings that you produce. It's kind of like a bit of a yes and no in different sort of circumstances. But from my own experiences, I think that trying to attain or keep some sort of moral high ground in your designs and sort of the products that you produce, if it's done well and you can have some clever design behind it, then you can sort of actually sort of benefit from that, not just sort of slide backwards, but you can actually sort of have a positive sort of impact from that.
Yeah. When you say done well, what does that mean?
Sorry, say that
from you, when you say if it's done well, what?
Or designed well, or then sort of clever
but
marketing.
What do you mean by well?
I guess you could material choices that are used, also sort of the manufacturing sort of location. I mean, at least the small range of products that we produce are all locally manufactured and produced. And we sort of, the design of the product is we try to design them so that people will have an attachment to the product, and that it's not something that, you know, it might be just a fleeting kind of thing, but it was something that will grow on them, so it'll be a sort of a longer sort of usage out of that product.
Do you guys see this as an ethical issue? I mean, is this something that is just part of life that is no longer a debate for you?
I think what interests me about this question are two words, or two groups of words in it. The first one is moral high ground, which seems to have a lot more meaning than its actual meaning. So I looked up in the dictionary. And redundancy. So firstly, redundancy. I mean, there's no greater redundancy than a planet that can't sustain human civilization. So in fact, taking the moral high ground to actually ensures that redundancy isn't going to happen. But I looked up moral high ground, I had to write it down. It is the status of being respected for remaining moral or upholding standards. Surely upholding standards is the very least of what designers should be doing, as well as not just complying, but creating fabulous solutions to these problems. And there's no greater problems than the redundancy of our planet. So it should be part of design that we're assuming this is one of the many problems that we need to solve, as well as the client problems and manufacture and all the rest of it.
Yeah. From an architectural viewpoint, Chris, do you get press ganged by clients or builders to take shortcuts that you feel are kind of going against the grain from your ethical viewpoint?
Yeah, I think there's a question coming up with, I don't know exactly what it's called, about selling your soul or something, which is interesting, but maybe, you know, at the moment, obviously there's a residential boom. I don't know about Brisbane, but in Sydney there is. And that residential boom is fueled by all sorts of circumstances, including low interest rates, overseas investors, superannuation funds, etc., etc. So what do people do? They build a lot of residential developments. And the nice thing about a residential development, as opposed to a hotel development, a hotel actually you have to run, operate, send people there every day, make it all work, and then every single day try to get people in there to sleep in that hotel. A residential development, you can sell off the plan and then you're out of it. And so there is no life cycle thought in residential developments. You build it as cheap as you can, make it look as expensive as you can, and sell it. And therefore, you walk into a display apartment and look at things that look like oak, then you find out it's actually only a fraction of a millimeter of oak, but it's actually not oak at all, because it's just looking like oak. And so obviously, when you combine that with earlier questions about how things used to be made and how things are made today, an iPhone wasn't made 50 years ago, so it can't be compared, but an oak table was made 50 years ago out of oak. And my grandparents would still have the same oak table.
Yeah, yeah.
And so obviously, when you go to the eco-specifier point of view, looking at life cycle of materials, then you have to have an interest in the life cycle of materials. And that's where all this currently falls apart, that the people building and developing don't have the slightest interest in the life cycle assessment of anything.
Did we have a question here? Yeah? Yeah.
I'm really actually interested in what you started talking about, Chris, in terms of the business model of how these things started to work and how the realities of the economics impact on the design world. And Yoni, you almost finished the word marketing, and that's all this sort of. It sounds like we're skirting around the other side of the dark side of the design world, which is that business side of things. And so I guess in terms of not being redundant and being able to continue a sustainable business as well as selling and producing a sustainable product. I'm wondering what role the panel thinks that designers have in understanding business models and actually being, Ray Thompson was a perfect example of someone who understood how to make that sustainable product offering and turn that into a sustainable business offering and work out how to deliver value. But I don't think that's really, I think that's almost a dark art, as when you talk about the moral high ground, the people that do that most often are activists who live perfectly, wonderfully, as the mass market completely could not. So how do we bring that, and how do we bring those worlds together?
Jennifer, do you want to... That's your problem to answer that question, Jennifer.
Okay. While you were talking, I was thinking, and I'm maybe slightly going off at a tangent, but I was thinking that in my experience as a designer, I remember my first job I went to, and it was to a very successful company that made restaurant furniture and what you were talking about earlier. It was making huge amounts of money, and they brought me in. I'd only just graduated, and I was the first designer they'd ever had, and they'd been operating for years and years and years very successfully. But when you looked at their furniture, it had not been designed, it had just been kind of put together. And so there was no design, there was no kind of thinking into it, there was no interest in sustainability, there was no looking at any other aspects. And I think that a professional design, I think very few products are actually professionally designed, far fewer than we think. And I did read a statistic about architecture as well, that you know, the amount of buildings that are out there that are designed by proper professional architects, the percentage is quite small, but I don't know if that's true.
In the residential sector,
yeah,
except in New South Wales.
And so the economic part of it, you know, I mean, sustainability is social, economic, and environmental, and all the other aspects that go into it as well, is part of being a professional designer, is trying to bring all those things together and absolutely have a moral high ground when you're doing it, I would hope. And to me, the problem is that we don't, as a society, value design in the way that we should, and often companies are not prepared to pay for it. And often people are not prepared to pay for it, and yet that's when you get good design that's done properly.
Okay, I think we've got one more question. Yeah?
Hi.
It's not you again, is it?
Yeah,
it's you.
Why are you not up here, Tristan?
Well, you know.
Fire away.
Well, it's a really great question, it is, but it's very loaded. And at the moment, we're all just taking it from one position of speech, which is from a kind of commercial consumer market position, as if we're all designing for business to make products and to sell them. What about the whole conversation somewhere completely different? Design for social change, design for the margins, design with the margins. So if I was to take a moral high ground, I certainly wouldn't think that that was going to lead me to redundancy. I'd certainly think that that would lead me towards all of the ever-increasing problems that are arriving in front of our feet in the future that are delivering all kinds of amazing opportunities for me to be involved in design via social enterprise models, micro-enterprise models, travelling to places away from the West to deal with those problems in the future arriving. So to take a moral high ground for me is extremely exciting, and the only place where it would feel like it would leading to redundancy is within the consumer commercial market, which I don't really have an interest in anyway. So can we have a think about some of the other parts of the conversation away from sustainable business practices to other parts of design that designers are involved in?
Well, I think that actually leads us beautifully into the next question, in which we will look at some kind of more darker side of things, hopefully. Because let's hang on to that thought and take it as somewhat as a comment, because I think we're at the end of our first round, and I think everyone's gasping for alcohol by the looks of people. So we're going to have, I think, a lucky door prize now. So you might try and remember your name if you can. And somebody. Sorry, no. Okay, I've just assumed. Do you want to announce this, Natalie? That microphone up there is probably still on.
Just before I announce the winner of this amazing prize, I just forgot to say that we're really honoured to have Chris Boss on the panel tonight, because Chris is actually part of the CUSP exhibition that's coming to SLQ. So please come back November the 1st to see, among others, Chris's work in that exhibition. So sorry I didn't mention that before. So let's draw the prize for this amazing prize. Oh. I haven't got my glasses on. It is Anne Brown from Aspect Architects and Project Managers.
We have interchangeable glasses. This evening's prize is from Vertilux, and it goes to... I've never ever won one of these. Natalie Wright.
I smell a rat around here.
It's an inside job.
Luck of the draw.
Series ticket holder prize for these two chairs from UCI Furniture Manufacturers goes to, not Natalie Wright, goes to Alison Sace. Oh. Redraw. Redraw. Should have come, Alison. Goes to Mitchell McDonald Robert. Oh, redraw again. All right, Amy Bowen. These people are crazy. There's two chairs.
Is that one for tonight?
Are there any series?
All right, Susan Moore.
Could be here all night.
Or tickets, right, season tickets. No, we can't. James Robertson.
Okay, we'll ask you if you would give a round of applause to the panel for our first 3 questions. Thanks, guys. We've got a 15-minute break, and I'll announce for you to come back. And that's quite right. It's very good of everyone. Thanks, Steve. Okay, 15-minute break, guys. Hello. I think it's time to get started again, so I'd ask the panel to come back to their seats and ask everyone to also drift back. You can bring your drink and we'll get started. Great responses. I'm impressed.
More questions?
Yeah. Plenty more coming. Yvonne, at the end you're saying something, is that right? Okay. Am I switched on? Yeah. Okay, so if you can tear yourself away from the bar and find yourself back to your seat, we'll get going again. We're going to go a bit darker now. Question number 4. Now that we've been sufficiently lubricated, maybe we can get into this realm. Have you ever sold your soul to the devil? What do we mean by that? I think the interpretation of this question is really, what's your ethical cut-off point? What's the most unethical situation you've ever been in? How did you handle it? And if you like, you can answer it as, well, I've got a friend that's a designer who, or you can be completely honest. But I think it's not, it's actually nothing to do with the devil whatsoever, but I think it's a point, we certainly, all as designers, I think, well, not just designers, but from a design point of view, this idea of having to make a decision, make critical decisions at some point in a project where you just know something is wrong, but you do it anyway because you've got to meet the budget, you've got to meet the time, you've got to get the client happy, you've got to get the people in, whatever the issue is. Let's start with you, Chris. You look like you cavort with the devil from time to time. Oh, sorry, let's ask the question, sorry. Forget about these damn things. So, have you ever sold your soul to the devil? Honestly, you're all lying so far. Liar, lying. Okay.
It's a very difficult one to answer, but I would answer no. And the reason is, I just touched the microphone and I was told not to, sorry. The reason is that there's a famous filmmaker who's so famous that I can't remember his name now, and he said, when you dine with the devil, you need a very long spoon. And he was referring to, the big production houses, the people in Hollywood who actually sponsor movies, who finance movies, and so on. And of course you want to work with them, because otherwise you're not making a freaking movie. But if you do, you have to be prepared to in some way respond to what they want, and somehow turn it the way that you want it. And so obviously, if you work in architecture, if you work in the development world, then you will always be working with people who have the sole interest of profit, who have political interests, who have all sorts of interests. At the same time, it gives you access to an opportunity where you can actually have an impact. So I've always been a friend of not sitting on the fence, but get in there and see what we can do. And as an example, for example, I worked for 5 years on the National Swimming Center for the Beijing Olympics, the so-called water cube. And then you could say, every time a German politician travels to China on a trade mission, it's a newspaper article about should he be going to China, don't forget the human rights, remind them this, do that, the working conditions, child labor, like you name it, everything, right? But by not going to China, am I going to change that? So we thought, or I thought for me personally, of course I want to be involved in this project. I want to build the best aquatic center of all times, the best swimming pool. I want to do Ian Thorpe proud. But I want it to be the most sustainable project ever, the greenest project ever. and I want to see if we can actually improve the working conditions on site. And from my perspective, of course, China is still many years behind, say, a country like, for argument's sake, Germany, because I'm German. But for the Olympics, they have actually really cleaned up their act. All of a sudden, they started, thinking about mobility in the city, about the factories, about carbon emissions, about working conditions, about how the laborers on site are actually housed, how they're fed, where do the materials come from, how are they put together, how is the ecological footprint of the whole Olympics, etc., etc. So I think we had, as a team, bigger impact on that topic than sitting in Germany and writing an article about how bad the world is.
Okay, good. Let's jump over. David, what do you think of this? In terms of selling your soul to the devil?
Yeah, I mean, look, for the first 20 years of my life, I was in architectural practice, so you actually, are required to make decisions at the time, and sometimes you didn't. I mean, I always had a sustainability bent, but I maybe didn't always push it as hard. Then I made the decision. I'd only work on projects that were willing to do sustainability, and then.
And you actually said no to some clients?
Yes.
You said no to
projects.
Fees?
Yes.
Had you won the job and then said no?
That's a difficult ethical position, and that's exactly the situation I'm talking about, having to say, well, okay, I will stay in this project. I'm not getting the outcomes that you agreed to, but
yeah.
I'm not going to leave you in the lurch. But over time, I got to the point where I thought, well, sustainability is important. I've spent a lot of time learning about products and how to do it properly. How do I have a bigger impact on the industry than doing one project at a time? So then we moved into EcoSpecifier, doing verifications of manufacturers' claims, and then into GreenTag, doing whole of life cycle analysis and setting our own standards. So I now have the luxury of being in the no camp in the latter part of my professional career, where we stand on our digs and we tell manufacturers if they don't do it right, they're out on their ears.
Yeah.
And we're successful in doing that.
Okay, fair enough.
Mind you, typically that's not what happens. Typically they will go away, redesign the product, and then bring it back and have it reassessed.
Yeah. Jennifer, it's time for true confessions.
When I first graduated in the 80s, the climate was very different then, and there was, and this is what I'm talking about in terms of technology and connectivity and understanding. I think it was a very different time, and I worked for a while in a consultancy in Oxford Street in London, and I worked there for 18 months. And during that time, everything that I'd been taught at uni, wasn't a reality that I was faced with. And it was very difficult at that age to actually stand up and say, no, I don't agree with something. And the crunch came for me when I was asked to do a colour scheme for Marks and Spencer's food court in Oxford Street. And I was given it at 9 o'clock in the morning and told that the client was coming at 12. And, everything you're taught about design process and what you're supposed to do, all you've got time is to just draw something and slap a bit of colour on it. So during that time, it was kind of, you do it and in the end I quit and then went travelling, which was wonderful. But
when you say in the end, you mean at what?
After 18 months.
I think you meant at quarter to 12.
Yeah. But I think when you're younger, I think it's very difficult. I think, now I'm in a position where I can stand up for myself, though not always. There are still situations where sometimes there's somebody in a position of authority who gives you an extremely hard time, and it's not always that easy.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I'm sure some of the people in the audience might have had similar dilemmas. Yoni?
I held up the yes card because I own an iPhone 5, but that was about it because I don't know. I thought when I saw the question when we originally emailed it to us, I thought about it for about a whole minute or so. Because I really couldn't think of any sort of situation. I mean, we're a young sort of a company, and I couldn't really come up with any sort of situations where I felt like I'd been sort of compromised in that sort of sense. But yeah, I do have an iPhone 5, so.
Put it this way: what if you had the opportunity to make a lot of money, but you knew there was some exploitation of some people in India or making this product involved, what would you do?
I'd think long and hard, and I'd find out the complete facts, I guess, about the situation, like you said, in India. But yeah, I would struggle with trying to go ahead with it, even if there was a lot of money into it. I would definitely err on the side of, yeah, look, let's not go down that path.
Yeah.
No, it's easy to sleep at night. But,
you know, the question is not...
Every day leads to the exploitation of someone in India.
Say that again. We missed the first
Every
part.
decision, regardless of whether it's a design decision or not, every behaviour that we take has some effect on someone in India.
Is this a statement, or are you...
Question mark.
Are you talking... So you could pretty much say that to any country in the world?
Yeah,
or, yeah.
Definitely.
Possibly, in some ways. Sometimes we're ignorant to most of those sort of occasions. But, you know, what you can do about those is often limited to how much knowledge you've got on what's happening. So most of the time it's just life just goes on and you keep going, doing what you do know best, and that's all you can do.
Because,
even if inadvertently you may be affecting someone down, you know, from another country, or someone who may be from a society where they are being sort of exploited for their materials or their sort of labour. But
yeah,
I mean, you know, even coming
like
here tonight,
day,
you
right?
could say you're doing that. So,
yeah,
what do you do about that?
I would always argue, like, if you're in that situation, can you take the job and can you somehow coax the client into changing the way that he was going to do it, because you can do it cheaper with local labour or with local materials?
That would be the best approach, I think, too.
And,
to try
saying
and work out a
no,
way
then you
where
just get the bloke next door, do it for half price anyway, in an even worse country.
Becky.
Well, there have been two major points in my career where I have been met with the devil and didn't sign the contract. And the first one was in my first graphic design job. And I'd been working there for about 18 months. And I was a bit uneasy with the level of honesty that was going on. And I was asked to sign a contract that required me not to use the word problem, but instead to exchange it for the word challenge.
Opportunity.
So I resigned. See you later. I mean, there are other issues as well, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. The second time it happened, and that was my first design job, and I got another one as designers
Was that for a political party?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, no.
The second was when I read a quote by a chap by the name of Tibor Kalman, who's a now deceased, I believe, graphic designer, and it said, "Don't work for people that want you to lie for them." And at the time I was art director at a record label, and I stopped and I thought, and I realised that possibly I was doing exactly that. So I resigned. And I went and studied a master's in sustainable graphic design. I opened a graphic design business that's still going, although it's a little bit on hiatus while I do my PhD, but I still keep my favourite clients and help them out if they need it. But the best part is that I've turned away more clients than I've accepted work with. And I do that with impunity. And they often come back and say, actually, we'd like to work with you. Or the clients that I do work with, it's not, they don't come to me with a job and I service their needs. We work together and we create really good solutions. And the key part of that is not how much money I make or how successful my business is, but how happy I am. And that's how I measure success. And that's how I measure my client's success. And they report to me that they're happy as well, because we've done the right thing by the planet, you know, using sustainable techniques and all that sort of thing, but also that we've done it right. Yeah. So that's why I held up no.
Okay. David,
sorry, just throwing in an anecdote. I had a wonderful conversation this morning with a young Filipino lady from a call center in the Philippines, working for a gas company, connecting my household to the gas network. And then, of course, you can say, I don't support people in call centers in the Philippines because it's stealing jobs from Australia, and so on, and the conditions aren't perfect, and they work too long, and they don't get paid enough. But what do you do? So I just made this, I had a lovely conversation, we had a good time, we got the gas connected, And I think, you know, I haven't changed the world, but maybe I have changed 10 minutes of that person's life, and I had a great time too. So I think there's these little things that...
I think if you look at humanity rather than nationality, then that's the right choice to make.
Yeah.
David, do you find people are responsive like this? You mentioned before that you know, they come back having changed their product or specification. Is that because they have to, got no option, or because they've seen the light?
I think most of the time they're genuinely surprised that it isn't even an issue. I mean, just today there was a manufacturer of bench seats for you know, change rooms, and we found that the finish that they were using on the bench seats was 50% VOCs and contained endocrine disruptor plasticizers. So we said, are you aware of this? And they went, actually no. I said, well, is it an issue for you to change the coating? They said, absolutely not. We'll get back to you tomorrow. So, I mean, they're using something that they'd used and they were relatively happy with, and I know there's natural waxes and oils that are going to give them a much better product. But unfortunately, as a certifier, I can't tell them that. They'll have to find out for themselves by using EcoSpecifier.
Yeah, we got a question.
Hi. I guess it's a really...
Why don't we just get you a seat up here and be done with it?
It's a really simple question. The devil. Who is the devil?
You are.
Well, if I need to play devil's advocate to raise the level of this conversation, then yes, I'll be the devil. So, is the devil capitalism? Is the devil neoliberal globalization? Is the devil climate change? Is the devil rising populations? Is the devil the destruction of human cognition? What are we actually talking about here? Which devil?
I think the question
moral
was,
low ground?
yeah, do we work against anything we believe in, was the question. So
yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, go on. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, sorry.
Is there anything you believe in? It's a question. The challenge is, I think the interpretation was anything you believe in. Do you?
Well, that's completely pluralistic. I mean, that's just kind of a general disjuncture of language and a breakdown of what we can actually talk about in this room tonight. I mean, if you're talking about one thing, you're talking about something completely different. Nobody actually has a position from which we can understand where the conversation lies.
Actually,
well,
it's a semantic
really
question, and we all seem to understand the position. The devil, it doesn't matter who or what it is, it's what we believe, which has been asked and answered.
Surely it matters if you're answering a question in a forum where not necessarily everyone in the room is aware of what you define as the devil.
I think the issue is that we've got 5 people, 5 different disciplines, all have to face their own demons, all have to face their own ethical issues. And,
so shouldn't that be the first position that you make clear?
I think they have.
I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I think they have. Anyway, I think it's time to move on. So hold on to your questions because I'm enjoying them. Let's go on to the next question here. Again, this is heavily design related. And clearly, timelessness is dead. You can look at this from an aesthetic point of view. You can look at this from a kind of life cycle point of view. You can look at this from a philosophical point of view. But I think it's an issue. It's a kind of bandied around term. You guys might have something to say about it for sure. About timelessness relative to design. I mean, it's something we all talk about, but not so sure we live up to our own advertised expectations. So, do you agree timelessness is dead? No? Becky? Jennifer?
Not really clear what you mean by timelessness. I don't know that it was ever alive, I suppose.
Well, I mean, my God.
Good point.
I think, well, let's start with you, Jennifer, since you're being so cagey. I think...
define it for me, define it.
Timelessness relative to design. I mean, people always talk about, you know, that they're proposing to design something, to manufacture something, to have some people use whatever they've designed or made for as long a period as time as they can possibly envisage. Whereas it seems to be the case that that's not necessarily the way life goes in a capitalist world.
Yeah, I suppose I think that's a bit naive. I think I would take you back to what we were talking about at the beginning with, in terms of, you design at a time within the context that you're living in. And, to me, good design should reflect your aspirations for society, or our aspirations for society, and the sort of ideals of values of a society at a particular time. So if you've got this kind of, I almost get the feeling you're kind of referring to like big oak chairs, like we were talking about earlier, or something. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think. Well, you can interpret it whatever way you like. But Chris, let's ask it from an architectural point of view. This is a consistent issue, and from an architectural historical point of view, it's a big issue.
I can't remember what I just answered, but I would say, for the time being, timelessness is dead. Because timeless is the most boring concept I can possibly think of. Why would things be timeless while we are all evolving and moving and progressing and inventing new things and flying to the moon, etc., etc., etc.? Timelessness is for me a real estate agent who says, mate, you got to paint it grey. You put 2.5 bathrooms with a study and an extra toilet downstairs, because this is what everybody likes. So you will be able to sell it again in 5 years for twice the price, because it increases 5%. And he gives you exactly the finishes, the materials, the furniture and fittings that are timeless, which means boring and average, and appeal to the mass market. But is that what design is? I don't think so.
I don't agree with that at all. I mean, how can you look at a Philip Johnson building or a Corbusier building that is imitated every day of the week since they were designed, and say that that's not timeless and it's not current and it's not real and it's not today? I mean, it patently is. So I think it comes down to actually what you actually, timelessness isn't about the trend of the moment because it's the right colour. It's about the classic design. It's about mid-century furniture that's trendy again today because it's just great design. It needs that sort of timelessness to be able, and quality.
Given that that's your thoughts, do you think it's dead today?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I think it's the aspiration, provided it comes with the kind of environmental footprint that means that it is one of the the best solution of the day. So the best environmental footprint with the timeless design, perfect solution.
Yeah, Yoni.
I don't think. Partly the reason why I got into design was as a response to some older and passed away Finnish designers, and you can look at some of their products and you could see that for sale now as a new product in a shop now. A lot of them are mid-century sort of products and furniture pieces and lighting and that kind of stuff. And yeah, they're just very impressively, well, to me they are very striking pieces, and they are timeless in that sort of use of the word. And I think that timelessness is something that does exist, and that in that sort of sense, timelessness could obviously could be 50 years, could be 100 years, or that kind of sense. But I think that there are a lot of sort of designs that can sort of stand the test of time, and the actual sort of aesthetics of it and the material choices used in it do play a big part into that. But there is the other side, obviously, like Chris, you were saying, where you can change up, every 2 years or whatever, you can change the facade on it or on a building or something like that. You want to keep it evolving, that sort of building, or if you can talk as a building as a product in that sort of sense. I mean, I understand that point of view as well, but I definitely do think that timelessness does exist in that sort of sense.
We've got a question from a proud owner of timeless UCI chairs here.
It's not a question, it's a statement. Nothing is original. Everything has been done in some way, shape or form before.
Becky, what do you think?
Well, was there a potato peeler that looked like the potato peeler before there was a potato peeler?
In some way, shape or form there was.
Hang on, one at a time, sorry.
What about the return of the spacecraft?
Sure, there was a knife or there was, a scythe or whatever you wanted to use, but...
I've been in the industry over 50 years, and I have young people coming to me saying, this is new, it's the 5th time around.
Yeah.
It's new for them, though. It's all about perspective.
But how sad is that if you wake up every morning and say there's nothing left to do because everything has been done already? I think, I tend to agree with, design classics and with the timelessness of ideas, the timelessness of a vision. When you think about, to go back to our initial topic, when you think about Jules Verne, 150 years ago, talking about two people on each side of the ocean, talking over a wire to each other, that's a vision. And then since then, there have been zillions of telephones, and tomorrow is the launch of another one. And he would never have thought that, but it's the same idea and the same vision, and every day we try to reinvent that vision. Yep. But if you had frozen that moment where two people with a wire and a can of peas talk to each other, then that wouldn't be the greatest progress of all times.
Yeah. We've got another question? Yes, Kevin.
Oh, hi. Directing a question mainly to Chris and Becky here. I mean, the idea that timelessness is dead is itself over 100 years old. I mean, it's not mind-numbingly boring to anyone involved in cutting-edge design. And I see that comes more out of an infatuation with production process rather than an assessment of whether or not people like a particular product or whether their capacity to absorb change is in itself a dead end. I mean, how long are we going to keep going on with this idea that the ever new is interesting?
Can I just answer that, and also in light of what Chris said about timelessness as the real estate agent describes it? And my comment on that is actually that sounds more like a trend to me that they're describing, that if you just put this here, it will sell. That's a trend or a fashion. Mm-hmm. Is it Tristan? Is that your name?
Don't bring him in.
But to look at Tristan's last question, which was a good one about the devil, I mean, how do we define timeless?
Of course.
And my timelessness is clearly different to yours because your description to me is a trend. Whereas for me, timelessness and aesthetics create meaning and attachment and emotion to objects. They're not just something slapped on, they're part of that thing. They are, they exist because of that thing. I mean, the classic design idea is form follows function. So if something like a potato peeler, which is, not the most hot thing in your kitchen drawer, but it's beautiful because it's functional. And to me, that's timelessness.
How about
and
the
I don't
Philip
think that
Stark
can ever
lemon
die.
juicer?
Sorry?
The Philip Stark lemon juicer, which is one of the most successful design classics of all times, but it's the worst lemon juicer on the planet.
It's not timeless to me. I've got one of those ones you squeeze together because it bloody works.
Are we answering this question to your liking? You two have been remarkably quiet with this one. Come on. Bring it on.
I'm just asking it for you now.
He wants the microphone. Give that man the microphone.
All this has got to do with the culture of newness, as this gentleman said over here. When are we actually going to give up the fact that the idea of progress and development in society is a social construction? This isn't some evolutionary thing that we're supposed to adhere to. Timelessness is completely fine, possibly, just as much as not being timeless is. They're both social constructions. I have a personal opinion about which one's a shitload more sustainable, and that's the one where products last, not where we have some culture of newness, where we have some sort of built-in redundancy.
That's such a simplistic answer, Tristan.
Well, I could extrapolate further and get philosophical, but I'd like you to.
Yeah, but if you say that, that things should last, wouldn't it be better to actually design them to be temporary? And we're talking. I mean, this was supposed to be about technology. This debate.
Nice?
So to me, the whole interest in technology in terms of design is the fact that we move towards services rather than products, and so that we use less resources and that we create, we sort of service our needs, whatever they are, without actually having such a sort of a large footprint. And so you're saying, I'm making something that lasts forever. To me, that's a complete anathema.
No, I'm not saying make something that's lasting forever.
You said something about that.
Mobilise the right kind of desire where people understand the ethical question of technology and they understand the matter of concern that they should have with technology.
But who's going to make that decision? So is
well,
it you?
Well, it's up to us. Every
single
person in society, in an ideal world, should have that level of understanding of the concern for technology.
I know, but who's going to actually make that decision about what is the ethical? I mean, we've got a panel here, which you have to respect this panel. The people here, you know, have achieved in terms of society, they're in a position of respect. And yet, we've all got very different views on things. And so what's wrong with that?
I don't quite understand your point, I've got to admit. Just in a nutshell, what's the point you're making?
Well, in a nutshell, it's the exact same point that the gentleman over there was making.
All right, summarise that then.
Well, the level of discussion here isn't taking into effect the fact that we don't have to give ourselves over to progress and development. That isn't an evolutionary step. We have a choice.
Well, I think the first caveman could have had the same position and we wouldn't be sitting here either. I mean, if you don't think the invention of the wheel was a step forward and the invention of tools and fires, etc. And I think it's in human nature, and not only human nature, in animals' nature and in nature's nature, in plants' nature, that we constantly reinvent ourselves, that we progress our lives and society in a philosophical way as well as in a material way. And I know it's not always going in the right direction, and we might be heading the completely wrong way, and then it will come to a big disaster, and then we will have to start again.
I think that's the point he's making, though, that we are heading in the wrong way, and we need to deconstruct it and head in the other way, because at the end of the day, if we keep going down this track, we just keep working harder and harder to buy more stuff, to get the next stuff, whereas in fact if we bought less stuff we could actually have more time to do the stuff in life that's important.
That's
so
right,
it's about whether...
Well, let's go another question over here. Kevin?
No, I just wanted to clarify. I mean,
Kevin, can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, I do believe in progress. I just want to distinguish between progress, social progress, and newness. I mean, that was the only...
Just hang on a second. Yeah,
that was the only concern behind my question.
So you're talking about progress as opposed to newness?
Yeah. I just wanted to distinguish between the two.
That's a very good distinction, and I don't think nobody would argue to just reinvent things for the sake of it. I'm just saying it's a part of human nature. I mean, how many chairs have been designed in the world, and why would you just choose the best chair that was ever designed and then not design chairs anymore?
Can we reframe this argument and go, okay, when a product is designed, is it actually taking us further towards the preservation of the natural systems on which we all depend, or is it taking us further away from the survival of those systems? If the answer is it's taking us further away, then it's in none of our interests. And I don't believe you can, with most of the technology that's there today, I don't believe you can honestly say it's taking us closer towards survival on this planet.
Okay, we've got a new bid here. Yeah, let's hear this new question.
Just looking at the question, timelessness is dead. I don't think that, I don't think anyone really agrees that it is, because we can all think of timeless designs. But my question for the panel is, do you think timelessness is dying?
So it's not dead yet, it's dying.
Yeah, I'm just, in terms of, there's some beautiful, when you talk about furniture and the Stark's Juicy Salif, these things have, for me, some of those things have got great memories, or, that I attach to them, and I think they're beautiful objects, and that's why I'd keep them around. But I see this, again, back to the phones, that's a piece of furniture that'll last for hopefully my lifetime. But then I look at phones, and they last 2 years. And within technology, I'm just wondering if there's anything that's come along, that any piece of technology that people have had that actually has lasted longer than a couple of years, apart from that Casio.
Yoni, would you like to answer that?
I think it's different playing fields. It's hard to sort of compare sometimes with technological items like phones and stuff like that, as opposed to sort of furniture pieces. But I don't think it's dying. I think it's just something that evolves in a sense, and there is always products that are being designed that will have that sort of timelessness sort of stigma attached to it, but
stigma.
It's sort of
stigma.
Yeah, it's not a bad stigma to have, I guess.
But not a stigma.
I think in the future, you look back in 20 years' time, and you might see some products. It's hard probably to pick it out of. I mean, can you, for instance, pick out any sort of mobile phone that you think is timeless? Is there one that sort of stands out, or that you could sort of look back now?
We've got another question. Let's take that as a rhetorical question, because I think I know the answer is going to be. We've got. Oh, sorry.
Hello. I just wanted to make a statement in terms of everyone, I believe, wants to be on a moral high ground about sustainability and protecting the earth. But I think the reality is to the general population who do want to go in that direction is affordability. And at the moment, because it isn't mainstream as such, it isn't affordable for those who would like to go down that. It's in general not main practice, and secondly is more expensive for an everyday person.
As a rule of thumb, absolutely not. That's just garbage. It's just lazy.
Just hang on one second, Dave. This is actually the next question. Let's talk about the next question. I'll ask you to repeat that. So the next and final question is, sorry to interrupt you, David, is designers talk the sustainable talk, but do they walk the sustainable walk? So can you just summarise that question one more time? Because now we're looking at that last question.
As my experience, I like to be on a moral high ground in terms of implementing design into interiors. However, from the products that I come across and that I can recommend to my clients, they always tend to be of a more expensive genre than everyday materials. And I do feel like you may shake your head, but you are extremely knowledgeable in this field, and an everyday builder may not be and might not have the access to the high-tech materials that you may know of. I feel that having this, everyone should feel like they should do things the right way is all good and well, but for the everyday person, I don't think it is as accessible as we would like it to be.
David.
I'm not coming from that point of view at all. I'm coming from the position of every day of the week assessing sustainable products on a whole of life cycle basis, knowing how much they cost as a practitioner, because I have a consultancy and an architectural practice as well. Being able to be implementing them and providing the information to the entire industry that allows you at the single glance of a logo or reference to a certificate to see exactly how one product is sustainable compared to the product next to it, just by the click of a button and look at a website. There's over 1,000 products that are certified under our Green Tag program that have every single one of them been assessed to a point where you can just look at 2 flooring materials and tell which is the most sustainable and compare the price. There's hardly a flooring product, for instance, in the marketplace that we haven't certified. So are you aware of that? Are you aware that you can go to a website and check out all of the flooring products and then compare them by price and make a decision knowing that any one of them you can choose is actually better than the business as usual worst case? So there's 1,000 products out there where the best in breed is directly comparable to the worst in breed, just at the click of a button without having to know, and you can do your own cost comparison.
Well,
but I can tell you from experience, it's not the case in all instances.
I think, though, the important part of your question is that David's got a lot of knowledge, and that's hard to access. So my suggestion would be, because I was in the same position before I went and educated myself, and not everybody has the luxury of being able to do that. So if you can't do that, then why don't you hire someone like a new graduate who does have that knowledge?
My question to the panel before they answer...
I would dispute that a new graduate has that knowledge anyway.
This question is...
I missed that, sorry.
What do you define as sustainable?
I can give you my definition. I think all designers need to acknowledge that pretty much everything we do is going to have an impact on the planet. So it's our responsibility, from my perspective, to attempt to minimise that as much as possible. And whether that means, you don't actually produce a job for your client in the end, or whether that means you produce a different job, or whether you produce the job they're looking for using better techniques. Those are all decisions that you need to make together in a partnership with your client or with whoever you're working.
I think, let's, Chris, from your point of view, answering this question, do you walk sustainable walk? And what do you mean by sustainability in your practice?
I think, I mean, it's a similar question to the devil question. And I think we're all, of course, running a risk whereby clients use our expertise to look good in a sustainable way. And yeah, we checked all the boxes. We talked to Chris, we talked to David, we are fully sustainable. And then they turn around to the opposite. So that's a risk we have to manage. But I think that being in a position where we can make choices and steer directions of developments and make it material selection, product selection, etc. Yes, we have the opportunity to do that every single day, and sometimes it works better than in other ways. Sometimes the price is in the way, and I would be very surprised to find that, David, that you always find a cheaper sustainable alternative. It's like you always find a cheaper non-alcoholic drink at the pub, which is a rule actually I think they introduced in Germany at some stage. And then they started selling milk cheaper than beer, because obviously nobody drinks milk in a pub. So I find there's always a garbage product. If you want to compare bamboo sheets to chipboard melamine boards, I would find it fantastic if the bamboo sheet was cheaper. I don't think it is at the moment.
But that's of course, looking at it from an economic perspective, like giving something value only because of its cost, not because of its longevity over time, or how happy it makes everybody. Yeah. Like, you've got to factor those things in. We're forgetting our human souls when we're doing these designs. That's the benefit
of you and us having this long-term assessment. But if you sit there as a client and you want to pull this building together and you're trying to do it as cheaply as possible and sell it as expensive as possible, and she's specifying the carpets, then that's the choices that you're facing.
Then they don't have the right ethics and you shouldn't be working with them.
David, how do you respond to that?
Look, there might be some product sectors where that's the case, but there are some product sectors where it's absolutely not the case. There's always going to be exceptions to a rule, but the point that I'm making is that information actually that's available in the market actually helps you make some of those decisions if you take advantage of it. And the reality is that even though there's a whole bunch of products coming out of China being sold here, we certify a lot of them too, and some of them are a lot better than you think they are. We certify over 120 different Chinese products. To the point where we actually now have Mandarin speakers on staff, so we can deal directly with the factories in China. So, it is, sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, but the point is that if you do a little bit more work with the information that's available in the marketplace, you can actually make your own decisions about what products to use in light of how sustainable they are, given the cost. And more often than not, you can actually make the right decision, which is the most sustainable decision.
Yes.
Jennifer, have you got, what's your take on this?
I think it's a very complex question whenever you're trying to deal with sustainability as an approach, in that almost everything that you're doing, for instance, I'm really interested in 3D printing, and yet my PhD is sustainability, and a lot of 3D printing at the moment is done in plastic, and so there seems to be a real conflict there. But what interests me about it is the fact that we can move from mass production towards mass customization, and we can break the habit of mass production, so it becomes a really complex thing. So I think if you're talking just whether designers specify to the best of their ability based on, particularly with your kind of website, I think that we do. I think designers in this day and age, I know certainly in design courses, the drivers are always about sustainability. How that's interpreted is often different in different design courses, but I think it's...
So are you saying that, sorry, are you saying that...
So I'm saying that I think designers do I think they walk the talk. But I think that it's a complex question, and that sometimes what we think of, what we might have thought of as being sustainable 10 years ago, we might in 10 years' time, or now, we might in 10 years' time have a different understanding of the impact of it, and we might change our mind then about what that means. So I don't think it's a case of just, I'm going to do the ethical thing. I think actually that's often an extremely complex thing to try and do.
I agree, it's quite a complex sort of a whole subject to talk about. A lot of it comes down to the knowledge or the ignorance that a designer has themselves, and sort of knowing about sort of resources that you can go to sort of obtain this information. But I guess all I can speak is from sort of my own experience, I guess. Currently we're a young company, so we sort of design products that are, most of the stuff we sort of focus on sort of two things: that the material choices that we use are very long-lasting and hard-wearing materials, and also that it's all sort of, most of it is locally sourced, and we manufacture it locally. So I think those sort of are quite weighty issues when it comes to sustainability, and being able to sort of possess those sort of qualities in our products, I think that holds a lot of weight, and a lot of people appreciate it too. Our customers appreciate it, that they know that, you know, piece of furniture or a bench top or something that they've ordered, a vanity or something, is being produced in Rocklea using sort of predominantly locally sourced materials. I mean, obviously we do get some of our materials from the United States, for instance, some additives and that kind of things, but that in return then helps us to create a more lightweight product, so we don't have to use as much sort of raw material in it. So, I mean, that's sort of our focus, to sort of adhere to sort of a sustainable practice in our manufacturing and the design of our products. So.
Yeah, okay. We've got another question here. Another one over here with Paula. Yeah?
My head's swimming at the moment, so I might just ramble for a little bit, and hopefully I'll end up at a question of some sort. I think this is a really interesting kind of point in the conversation, and I think each of your different disciplines see different challenges with what sustainability is and means, and how you actually work with that in a business sense as well as a design sense. And Chris, whether it's you're trying to have that conversation about following through on a sustainable decision when all of a sudden the dollars come into it, whether it's Yoni, you make beautiful products that I make a lot of money, not this week because I'm technically unemployed, but I normally make a lot of money, and I still actually can't afford to justify forking out for one of your products. I mean, they're beautiful and you definitely deserve the price tag that you put on them, but I can't make that jump in my mind. And it's, you know, how do you meet the financial, and you know, we all understand we're talking about value here, and there's a value of sustainability that isn't quite as crystallized as the value of an Australian dollar or a financial dollar, and that's something that is far more tangible that we can understand. And I think the part that I'm really interested in is to bring this back to the overarching topic of technology and design is, how can we use technology to unpack what that value of sustainability is, to allow us to more easily walk the sustainable walk? I think that's what was in my head.
Let's hold on to that thought. Let's overlay that with Paula's question here. We'll get these guys to respond to both.
Which, Jared, mine's not too far from actually where you're at, is that with design and technology, and the question from the designer over here, which I can understand, is it the education for all of your disciplines? Is it the dissemination of that knowledge? Is it not being achieved? Because I agree with David, there are resources out there in all the disciplines, and I'm not just talking from my own, I've been in the industry for a very long time across a lot of your products that you're speaking about, but is it part of the education program? Are you not is the information about what is sustainable and what that actually means versus the cost of something at the same time as taking into account that cost? Because I as well come into that cost factor in regards to developments. So I just am bringing that back as a question. Is it part of, are we not getting the information successfully through? Is it from a manufacturer's perspective? Is it from the GBCA? Is it, I don't know, are we disconnected in some form?
We've got time for a quick sum up from each of you if you want to like to address those.
What's really interesting to me is that we all have such a deep understanding of our particular industries and fields in design and how that works and what products are sustainable and what our relationships with suppliers look like and things like that. But the reality is that we are also all consumers. We all have clothes that we buy from somewhere. We all buy mobile phones. We have cars. We live in houses, and we rent or we purchase electricity plans from different kind of people and what have you. We all live in a consumer world where we consume things. And by and large, this goes to the conversation that was being had earlier. David, you've got a fantastic body of knowledge about what products are and are not more or less sustainable or certified, and for what reasons, and what that actually, how that balances out against cost and dollars. And sometimes the perception that what is sustainable is inherently expensive is not always true. That's sometimes a fallacy. But the reason that perception exists is because by and large it is created by a mass market, and it is everywhere that we see. You know, if you've got an electricity bill and you want 10% green power, you pay a premium for that.
Okay,
Ecological,
let me just, we've got time for a quick sum up. Chris, do you need to address any of these questions?
Do I?
You've got
it's a very difficult one to sum up, but I was, a few weekends ago, I was in Mullumbimby at the gardens, I think it's called, and it was a wonderful day. Everybody was growing their own tomatoes and carrots and
I know what they were growing in Mullumbimby.
Music on a little bit of that too. And you know, the use of hemp for clothing, for all sorts of things. And they were making music out of self-made instruments, and they were dressed like 100 years ago. And it was a wonderful kind of utopian vision of how life should be. But then at a certain moment, you know, they all went and updated their Facebook profile. And what I actually like about this is I believe our take on sustainability, and that may be simplified, but I'm just going to say it how we see it, is that there's nature that has been around forever, and it's kind of, call it God, call it nature, call it something else, but it's fundamental principles of life and evolution. And there's technology that constantly changes and constantly gets updated and constantly influences our life. Yeah. And I think if we bring these elements that are fundamental essentials of life together with constantly updating technology, communication technology, manufacturing technology, the way that food is produced, the way things are distributed, etc., then we come to a vision of now and future where we acknowledge there's things that don't change and other things do change and have to change. I'm not advocating moving to Mullumbimby and pretend the future hasn't happened, and actually they are not doing that either. I'm advocating working with principles from nature and combining that with latest technologies. And I mean, Eco-Specifier website is a good example. That wouldn't have existed 20 years ago because there wasn't an internet. But now you can actually combine you can combine this knowledge that is thousands of years old with the latest technology and make that available to the world. And I think that then creates a sustainable, holistic principle where we can somehow, as a human species, thrive towards survival and not Armageddon.
Becky, what's your profound summary?
Well, I'm not sure it's profound, but I will try and wrap up a few of the questions that were asked and unanswered. And that is that manufacturing, my research in 2007 in the graphic design industry, obviously that's my field, showed that it's paper manufacturers and printers who are the most sustainable, and providing the education for existing graphic designers on that. So good job, you guys. And that needs to continue. And we also, I can definitely vouch for the education in Queensland on sustainability, ethics and techniques, at least until this year, because I'm delivering those lectures. So I think they're bloody great.
What a plug.
And lastly, I think there's a lot of heart to be taken in people's opinions of society, in that my current research shows that even the most vehement deniers of a small sample of climate change are still concerned about waste. So there is care, there is concern out there. And so as designers, to cover all those fields, we need to remember we're not just producing products or designs or posters or whatever, we're also producing better clients, better manufacturers by demanding these things, and a better society by what we do.
Yoni.
Yeah, I agree with Becky. I was probably the most recent here. That was at university, finished up about 2009. So, but it was quite heavily sort of influenced throughout the whole course at QUT there about sustainability and sort of integrating that into your designs and sort of, you know, your choices that you make in your design process, as well as all your material choices and these. So, I mean, it was you sort of left university sort of thinking you could, I remember preaching to, you know, friends and family of mine about all this stuff I'm learning at uni about sustainability and what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. But then leaving that sort of sheltered sort of a little society there at university where you have the preachers behind the pulpits there into the real world and then sort of starting your own business has its own reality and trying to sort of implement those kind of things. There is give and take in all of that, but I think it's quite well. It's quite good that the universities are pushing for that, and I think it's very healthy, and I think they're doing a good job at that. It's bridging that between sort of that education and taking it to the real world, and even from there, taking it from like the designer's point of view. I think, like Becky, you said that between the designers and the manufacturers, there is that gap there that needs to be bridged, and I think at least from like. That's not what I said. Oh, sorry. I sort of understood that. That's what you said. Sort of manufacturers can get educated from designers, but I think from that point of view that manufacturers can learn a lot from designers and from the knowledge that they have on sustainability of techniques and sort of material choices, that they can learn from that as well, because obviously sometimes it's hard for the manufacturers to learn some of the things that we as designers have learned in universities. But
Becky, I'll let you respond to that in one second.
Right.
But let me just get David and Jennifer. David.
I'm just sort of picking up on the technology issue and the education issue. I think one of the biggest problems that we have is that the students, as they're coming out, aren't being educated about life cycle analysis and life cycle impacts, and the manufacturers are not using sort of whole of life design strategies to look at mitigating the impacts of products across the board. And so if we have a situation, particularly in the building sector, where the economics of green buildings and green interiors and green products are actually very well proven now, yet we don't see that being pulled down into probably the sort of B grade and C grade type projects. There seems to be this kind of gap between the education and reality and the pragmatics of the economics that I think the education would overcome if the people who were going out of our educational institutions were completely up to speed on the industry today as it is, because often they're coming out 10 years behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a huge issue. Thanks, David. Jennifer.
Well, having spent yesterday from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock, back-to-back teaching sustainability on with Becky, I think we are certainly, I think it's a driver for all design courses. I think technology plays a big role, or has the opportunity to play a big role in professional development, ongoing professional development, because it's all very well sending out graduates who have, like you say, these high ideals, but then if you're faced with a sort of work as usual, practice as usual, it's quite hard as a young graduate, and that's how I felt in the 80s coming out, that it was quite difficult to change what was happening. So I think technology, and I love the fact that we have that connectivity, we have social media, we have Twitter, we have all the rest of it,
in that it allows us to have these kind of debates and this kind of dissemination of understanding in a way that wasn't possible before. And I think technology is having a huge impact in manufacturing, certainly in my sector, because it's moving us really away from what's been happening in the last 100 years and creating opportunities for distributed manufacturing and the relocalization of manufacturing and completely different relationships that we have with objects around us, and with a move towards kind of more product service system thinking. So I think it's a really exciting time, and I think it's a great opportunity to move forward in a positive way.
Can I just ask whether it's compulsory?
That was such a good line to finish on, David.
Could I just ask if it's compulsory for all the students who go through design at your faculty?
It's absolutely compulsory. It's not
compulsory?
optional. No,
Is it
2008.
Compulsory in yours?
It was optional.
I'm only
now
lecturing on sustainability and nothing else.
Yeah, but well, that's my point. Sometimes.
But it's core subject.
It's core subject.
It's a core subject.
First year. So what I was doing yesterday. First year, so I had 160 students yesterday. First year, and that's what they're studying is sustainability, and then they build on that every year.
Well, that's good news.
And you
but
can
it's
ask my
certainly the
students.
case in some architectural faculties.
Yeah.
And design faculties, interior design faculties, that it's not the case.
But it is in some, like UTAS, the University of Tasmania. It certainly, absolutely was.
I agree.
Becky, did you want to?
There are plenty of others where it's
very
not.
Positive.
Did you want to have one last word?
Well, I can see some guest lectures forming right here, if you know. But I just wanted to reinforce the idea that actually sorry to disagree, but that wasn't right. Your summation of what I said, which is that actually I've learned a lot from manufacturers, and I'm sure Paula can agree that when designers ask manufacturers for solutions rather than tell them their lofty ideals, they get great sustainable solutions, and everybody learns. And then it's again you're working as partners, not in service delivery. But that's all. Yep.
On that positive note, I think we should, we're about at the end of our time, and I would like everyone to give a round of applause to this conversation. And I'd like to invite Yvonne Ranson to sum up. Yvonne.
I don't think I can sum up an argument that's actually incredibly complex and coming from a number of disciplines that have sometimes counterproductive intentions. I was delighted to hear Chris's, and actually to have a look at Chris's schemes for the UTS tower, which when I started at UTS was described by Neville Quarry as a pile of Weet-Bix sandwiched together with Vegemite. So even in aesthetic terms, it was never quite sustainable. I'm also delighted to see robust and passionate discussion. And I think it's really important that we don't hold back, so congratulations, Tristan. It is really important that you contribute your opinions and you push your ideas, and that you all continue to push your ideas and push each other, so that we can start to create a coherent debate, because it's not a particularly coherent debate anywhere in the world at the moment. So, without further ado, I'd like to say thank you to the moderator. Sorry, I've got to put my glasses on. Our moderator, Michael Malloy, thank you very much. That was beautifully conducted. Thank you very much to our esteemed panellists, Chris, Jennifer, Becky, David and Uni. Don't hold back. It's really important. I'd also like to thank our major partners, Space Furniture, support partners, Caribou, Cult, Intrek, James Hardy and Vertilux, in-kind partners, Colour Chiefs, UCI, thanks for the chairs, GWA, Harley Venables Design, KW Doggett Fine Papers, Avon Graphics, the Asia Pacific Design Library, The Edge for the webcasting. We hope there are people out there watching us. Mantle and Cook for catering and Fino Foods. Photography by Kelly Lotz. Please delete anything hideous of me. And our very special dialogues coordinators, Linda Ruger and Laura Stevens. We're saying goodbye tonight to Linda. She's off to London to create a sustainable future. Thank you, Linda. Good night. All right. And thank you, everyone. That's it. The end.